To you four interested individuals, I have something that's very important that I want to share. And first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Joe Laferty. I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. I'm a Minikoju, Lakota. Descendant from Iron Lightning, whose son was Grant Iron Lightning, who was my mother, Florence Iron Lightning Laferty's father. And on my father's side, my father was Henry Laferty, and his father was Art Laferty. And they are from the east end of our reservation, and my mother's family is from the west end of our reservation. And I grew up mostly off the reservation, attending various boarding schools and Mormon placement programs, and wasn't really educated in my culture until I became a teenager, knew it all, and quit school and went out to find out on my own what life was all about as an Indian. Along the way, I met an elderly gentleman who became my grandfather, and his name was Felix Green, who was living in, at the time, Cherry Creek, which was another community on our reservation, but is originally from the Norris Parmalee area. And he was a medicine man, and was living with one of the elderly members of our tribe down in Cherry Creek. And I was taken down there by a friend of mine to one of his ceremonies and was introduced to him. We kind of took a liking to each other in a friendly way. I made several trips down there on my own to visit him, and started getting to know him, stay with him through the summers, and all the way up until the day that he passed away in 1978. We were really good friends, even in spite of our age difference. I call him my grandfather, even though we're not related by blood. But in those years that I stayed with him down there in his residence, a lot of people would come for ceremonies, and he would share a lot of the wisdom. He was, for lack of a better word, I would say he was somewhat of a prophet, or a seer of the future, and shared a lot of information and knowledge with me that I cherish to this day. Most of it I carried in my pocket for the entirety of my adult life, and in the last few years, that knowledge has been coming back in a form of dreams. And I guess at that time, without realizing and understanding it, he was preparing me to do what it is that I'm going to be doing in this coming year. But it's all based on what he called the Wichui Chale Shakui Ihumble, the 7th generation vision. And I'm going to relate that now, and then I want to do some elaboration on it, which is my presentation here, my reason for being here. The vision that I'm going to relate is somewhat compact and not in its entirety, but the importance that as it relates to this Lakota language summit is the part that I'm emphasizing here. When the white man first landed on this holy island, the spirits here told the Lakota people that this white man is here. And they told them that for 7 generations, you people are going to walk away from what you have now. The 7th generation that's born is going to be born with the curiosity to want to know who they are, what they are, and where they come from. It's this generation that's going to turn around and begin the journey back to where you are now. So pay attention along the way, because everything that you pass going there, they're going to pass on the way back here. And as long as it takes you to get there, that's how long it's going to take them to get back here to where you are now. And they counted my grandfather counted a generation as approximately 70 years, the span of a person's life. And 7 times 70 is 490 in his words. And so from 1492 to 1982 was about the length of 7 generations living here on this earth. The first generation that encountered what the spirits had told them back in 1492, the first generation, years after the spirits told him the vision, didn't change drastically at all. The life on the plains pretty much remained the same. The seasonal dietary and migratory routes that were used remained the same. The landmarks to each area all were relevant to nutrition and the survival of the Lakota. It was always changing, yet consistently provided sustenance to the Lakota people. So they were a migratory people, but it was based on survival, the sustenance that the earth provided in those particular geographical areas at particular times of the year. After a winter of living on dehydrated foods, one of the first natural plants that they would consume was the wild turnip, the timsila, because of the high nutritional value. And then they would go on into the season with the other wild plants and the berries, and the consumption, and also the dehydration and preparation and storage of it for the coming winters, all the way into the fall season, when they were hunting the bigger game, when it was more practical to cut and dry meat for storage and use through the winter. The Lakota were a part of the nature and never thought of living differently, and were satisfied with their life. And with that in mind, and what the spirits had said about walking away from what they had then, always had a question: how could such a positive culture conceive of what lie ahead with the negative culture that was coming, even though it was forewarned by our ancestral spirits? But in spite of, I guess, that, they did remember the words of the spirits. And as they would gather in the fall for the buffalo hunts, or join together in the summer for their annual Sundance, they would always discuss the same topic. Then as they came along, because of the importance of what the spirits had said, and because of the importance of them wanting to remember the passing of that trail along the way, they began the winter counts. And up to then, I think the only recorded history that we had was on the petroglyphs, on cliff walls and cave walls in different areas within where the Lakota people had lived. And but because of the emphasis on paying attention to the journey, well, they started this winter count, and we understand the winter counts as putting down a symbol that represented the most important event of that year, and the relating and retelling of that event brought back other memories that were related to that same particular year. So that's basically, to my understanding, where the winter counts came from. But even in the concept of the winter counts, they just never did think that in the future, things would change so drastically, and that the families and the tribes would be separated. So the translation and understanding of that mark on that winter count was left to that historian that created it, and the passing down at some point was interrupted because of the genocide that occurred. But never could they conceive of any force going against the very earth that bore and raised them, to the extent that they were living at that time, and it was their life was so filled with I guess timing of the earth and its seasons that they never looked beyond that very far. But and so they didn't record beyond those winter counts. And then the Oyate, they lived and enjoyed a life that was rigorous yet pleasing. At the end of each day and night, the coming and goings of the seasons brought much ceremony to appease the nature of the human being within the Lakota Oyate. And it was at these ceremonies that the past and the future were discussed, and more recordings were added to the winter counts, to the oral history and the telling within each family and band and tribe. And they came along, and then one day they saw a white man, and then they saw more and more, and then the genocide began. It began with the cutting and the scarring of the earth by the wagon wheels of the white man, and huge living trees not yet done with their God-given life were cut down and used to litter the prairies with man-made houses and buildings. They made pens and cages to imprison the animals and birds, and it was like changing. And then they started killing the people themselves. The onslaught became so great that even the time to discuss and relate the vision to the current state of affairs was not a luxury. The running fight to stay alive became increasingly worse every day. And then after the killing began the separation of the tribe and the families within the tribes, and the culturally relevant familial structure that had kept the people alive through the millennium of life here on this holy island was torn apart by the negative progress of the white man. And through all of that, when the winter count historians died, the translation to the winter counts died with most of them, and the language and the culture was slowly decimated by the influx of the non-native language and culture being forced upon the surviving few. And it was these brave few that took the remainder of the language and the seeds of the language and translated it to the modern vocabulary and left us with the roots and the seeds of the language and culture, and also with the understanding that as long as there is nature and there, we still have our culture, because the previous language, the parent language that was of our most ancient ancestors, it wasn't made overnight. It was through dreams and experience that the words were formed, and like plants and nature were understood and became a name and a cure. The naturally revolving season and all the elements that come and go with each season became words and communicative sounds. And that was thousands of years in the making. And even at that, as some plants became obsolete or animals and plants evolved, so did the language and the names and the use of the language for them. But it was our most recent ancestors using the remembrance of this seventh generation dream and understanding the importance of the language and its relationship to it and the continuation of it. They translated the language to fit the modern terminology, and again, not even conceiving at how fast the world would change. And just like the winter count historians, they only took it so far. And so it started to drop off there after the turn of the century, and what language that we had then was conformed and adapted to fit what was understood then as the modern way of life. And but through all of that, from day one in 1492 all the way up to our most recent ancestors, there was never ever a conflict over language use, or language ownership. It was just looking at an object and having a descriptive language and using that language to describe that object or the event or whatever the occurrence was. And so that's how, that's what we're left with today, is the resemblance of our ancient language, but as it was understood, that the language was formed from the earth, the nature, and the culture that those people had lived through all the way up to now, and that's how that was developed. So we have to keep that in mind, and as I go along, I'm going to come back to that point, because that's where I'm going with all of this. Then we have this seventh generation vision that was first spoken about. It was first presented to the Lakota people, and it was spoken to them by the spirits of our ancestral spirits, the spirits of our ancestors, and it was spoken in the Lakota language, and it was meant to bring the people all the way forward 7 generations, and it was meant to be used as a destination language that our generation now will endeavor to reach, and that in some day in the future the language of our people will be Lakota, and the elements that help to develop the first use of the language will grow back, and that is the nature itself, the grasses, the trees, the rivers, the landscapes, the animals, and the people living and studying and becoming dependent again on that nature. That is going to be the avenue that's going to help us to revitalize that base language. And so today, in our 7th generation, we have what the spirits had talked about. Our young people today are born with that curiosity to want to know who they are, what they are, and where they come from. And today, many of our young people are involved in the ceremonies, the Sundance, the UEP, the Sweat Lodge. They're all learning about the pipe, and now with the emphasis and the revitalization of our language and the emphasis being placed on it, they're starting to learn the language that goes with these ceremonies, that goes with our culture, and little by little, it's becoming a part of their life. But my reason for being here in my presentation on the 7th generation is that in what my grandfather had shared with me in those days, and what he had left with me, I've carried all these years without really understanding the importance, or even knowing that it was important, or would play an important part of our future. The dream that comes with it, the vision that comes with it, is a dance, a children's dance that's going to happen one time in our lifetime. And if it ever happens again, it won't happen again for 500 years. Because it's this dance that is going to be the symbolic turnaround of the 7th generation. And as he related the understanding of life to me back in the early 70s, before there was computers, but I can see even that now. But he talked about where we are today. We look at life, we look at it through a square box, a square image. And in this square, it eliminates about 90% of our vision and 90% of our life understanding. And when we look at the TV, we're looking through that square. We get up and we look out the window, we're looking through that square. And some of us are nearsighted, we put glasses on, we're looking through that square. We get in that automobile and we're going down the road, and that windshield is a square. that's shrunk our minds and our thinking. So this sacred dance that we're going to do with the children, what it's going to do is that it's going to stretch these children's minds. It's going to stretch their minds back 500 years to be able to see and understand who and what our ancestors were 500 years ago and where they come from. And it's going to stretch their minds 500 years ahead to see who they are, what they are, and where they come from. In that it becomes a destination, it becomes a responsibility, it becomes something to do while they're living here on this earth as a Lakota, as an indigenous person, an indigenous ascendant of this earth and its nature itself. And so when I talk about this dance, it's only going to be one day of dancing, but it's going to be 4 days of preparation. On June 17th, 2010, I want 28 children between the ages of 12 or 13 all the way up to 18, 19, 20 years old to come to Iron Lightning, South Dakota to participate in this dance. And the criteria that is the most important part of this is that the 28 that participate bring a parent or a grandparent that's going to be with them every waking, every sleeping moment of this entire 4 days. So they come on the 17th with that parent, and that parent puts aside their phones, their business schedule, their day-to-day job, and they set up camp with them on that evening. They go to bed with them, they wake up with them, they go through all of the presentations and learning of this entire event, so that when it is done, they have a close kin to sit and process this whole event with. And the first day, June 18th, Mr. Orville Lookinghorse, who is the keeper of our buffalo calf pipe, has agreed to allow us to go there as a group. So we're going to sweat lodge there at Iron Lightning at the camp, and then we're going to all travel to Greengrass to the buffalo calf pipe, and he's going to explain to us and relate to us the story of the bringing of this calf pipe. And then each participant with their parent is going to pray there by the little house where they keep it. And then on the next day, on the second day, June 19th, we're going to have people like Albert Whitehat and Mike Hecrow, Marcy Gilbert, and several other people from different areas related to our culture past, related to our culture present, to sit and talk and visit with these children and their parents, and to share knowledge, because we're opening up their minds. We're beginning the exercise to stretch their minds. We're stretching their minds backwards, forward. And that's going to be the second day. The third day is going to be a separation by gender for the first part of the day. And we're going to talk about the gender roles with the boys. And we'll talk about the gender roles with the girls. And the last half of the day is preparing for the fourth day. And when the day is over, we're going to put these children to bed early along with the parents. We're going to retire them real early in the evening, because when the next day begins, before the daylight comes, the parents are going to bring their children out to the middle, and they're going to sit down with them. And in that darkness, before the daylight, Mr. Albert Whitehat is going to share again the creation story and the ceremonies that were derived from it. And as the daylight comes, we're going to build a fire. We're going to start a fire. It's going to be one of the elements of the altar in the middle. And then we're going to fill our sacred pipe. Then, before the dancing of the children begins, we're going to have a buffalo dancer that we're going to take from the Sundance ceremony come in and bless that sacred area and bless these dancers. And then the dancing is going to begin. And we're going to keep that fire going that whole day. And we're going to take breaks and we're going to share water with these children. And then when the sun is highest in the middle of the day, we're going to bring in a couple of men from another tribe that have this eagle dance still as a ceremony more than a tourist attraction, or more of not so much as a show, but they still use it as a ceremony. And these eagle dancers are going to come in and they're going to dance and they're going to pray and perform a ceremony around each of and every one of these dancers. And that is the stretching of the mind, taking their mind and their spirit and flying it back 500 years to see and to understand and know what our ancestors were, who they were and what they were and where they come from. And then bringing them back to that day, and then taking them again to the future to see and to know and understand what their destination is going to be. And then we're going to go on into the afternoon. And as we reach the end of the day, the conclusion of the day, we're going to put a staff here in the east entrance. And these children are going to dance towards this staff 4 times. This is the tail end of the 7th generation. When they reach the staff, they're going to dance around and turn and come back towards the west. When they make that turn and to face the west, they're going to become the first 28 members of the first generation of the next 7. And then that 7 generation journey begins from that day forward. And one of the important other criteria that these parents are going to have to do, and this is where we involve and we invite other people that aren't going to be able to make it on that day. And I know there's just a few of you in here, but I want to appeal to you to remember this and to think about it and get ready for it. On June 21st, if you're not able to make it to that dance, I want you to prepare a bundle. You can make it out of cloth, you can make it out of leather, you can make it out of a suitcase, you can make it into a wooden box. But I want you to prepare this and put your name in there. If you have a spouse, put your spouse's name in there. Put your children's name, and if you're a grandparent, put your grandchildren's name in there. And put your parents and your spouse's parents' names and their grandparents, your genealogy, put that down and record it in writing. And if there's anything in your family that's significant, whatever your abilities are, whatever your contributions have been to your community, to your generation, and the same if your parents and your grandparents, their contributions to their community and their generation, their band and their tribe, put all of that history in there. And whatever other sacred objects that you may have that you want to be carried into the future, put it in that bundle and prepare a meal. And gather your children and your grandchildren, your family, and pick one of your children to be the keeper of that bundle, to carry for the entirety of their lifetime, to open and to share with their siblings and their family throughout their lifetime at different significant junctions and mile markers of their life and their family's life, to keep it updated, and as they reach the conclusion of their life as elderly, to do the same thing, to pick a child, to pass it on to become the speaker, the caretaker of that. And to do this for the next 7 generations, because through those winter counts and the passing of those historians, we lost significant information. Through the assimilation process, we lost valuable information because we couldn't talk about our past. We weren't allowed to celebrate the victory of the Little Bighorn because it became a criminal act as soon as it was done. And so we didn't talk about it in the public. We didn't celebrate it. We didn't celebrate the heroes of that battle and other battles. We had to keep it quiet. But today, we have heroes in our parents and in our grandparents. We must not make the same mistake. You know, as the caretaker reaches the conclusion of their life, they must choose another and instruct them the same as they were in receiving the bundle. Then in 500 years, approximately in 2510, these bundles will meet and they will be opened. And they are the proof that we are the native inhabitants of this holy island. And I hope and pray that on that day when these caretakers open these bundles, whatever discussion and prayers occur on that day, that it will be done in Lakota. And that there will be people alive at that time that will wonder, what was the English language? Did you ever hear it spoken? You know, I hope that we are that successful, because that is what the 7th generation vision is all about. That's what my grandfather left with me. And I did not even know and understand it all these years until just a few years ago. But imagine the magnitude of that day. You know, who was your grandma? And who was your grandfather? You know, where did we come from? And why does everything look so familiar, even though we've never been here? You know, and even the names of the people. You know, your Unchi, your Lala, your Tuin, your Lekshi, your Tonjan, your Toshka, Tanshi, Mukashi. All of the terminology. The way that we addressed each other in the past, we'll address each other then. And we think about our ancestors and how strong they must have been to have survived that genocide, the day-to-day onslaught of killing by the government soldiers, and how Crazy Horse, being on the run, never even had time to stop to build a fire to warm the elders and the children. You know, we think about how strong they were, and I try to imagine and look ahead 500 years and listen to some of the conversations that happened on that day. You know, and this vision itself, in the telling of it, and as I try to elaborate on it, and I see the things that I saw when my grandpa talked about it, I mean, it creates a lot of emotion, and it's hard to talk about. But I think about the people that are gathered here at the summit like they were last year, and in the coming years, and what the conversations of those people 7 generations from now, and what they're going to be saying about all of you people here that are linguists, that are advocates of the Lakota language, that are advocates of your native tribal language, that are promoters and educators and developers and revitalizers of this language. And listening to those people talk about the strength of all of you, that in spite of the diseases that plague us today, the cancers and the diabetes, the poverty and the alcoholism, the oppression, the force of the federal government trying to still maintain their goal in creating and recreating us to be like them. All of those obstacles, and how strong, and this would be in their words and how I envision it, how strong our ancestors must have been to keep this language alive Even some of them didn't even understand their own language, and some of them weren't very fluent. And some of them were very fluent, but they were very oppressed. How strong our ancestors must have been. I think that these are what they're going to be saying. Just the way that we say the same about our ancestors. And that's what this vision is going to be about. And these 28 children, I put my faith in the Creator. I put my faith in the parents and the grandparents that may hear this and may think that that's something that they would like to do, an experience that they would like to choose, that they would like to have with one of the children that they choose to participate with in there. And when those 28 have gone through this and are going through it, I would like them to create a bond and develop a bond and a network to monitor the progression of our language and the progression of our culture and the progression of our journey back to the past, making it our future, so that when 500 years has come and gone, as these ascendants of ours sit and stand and walk on these prairies in this sacred land, that they would be living in our language and speaking that language. But this is a very crucial dance. It's only going to happen once. It's going to happen this summer, June 21st, 2010. And that's what I guess my presentation here was about today. I chose to bring it here because of the diversity of the Plains tribes that are participating, the Lakota, the Dakota, the Nakota, the Blackfeet. There's some Dene here. There's some, I met one other tribe, a Cree. There's a lot of different tribes that are here, but mainly the ones, the diversity of the different bands that live and believe and understand the seventh generation, that believe and understand the significance of it to the pipe and the ceremonies that go with it, so that we can get a representation from the various bands and the various Tioshbais and families throughout Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota country on that day, that maybe at least one from each dialect, one from each band and tribe will be represented there on that day. It could be all Cheyenne River, but I would like it to be broad, and I would like it to encompass all of us that are here in this gathering, because we're all advocates of the language. We're all promoters of the language, and that is the language that goes with the seventh generation vision. And I guess probably conclude it there, with the exception of if there's any questions or any further discussion. I got some, I printed out some of the information of what I'm talking about. There's a map on here to show you where Iron Lightning, South Dakota is. I have a paper with my name and my contact information on it, and just a small part of the vision, the beginning telling of it. I'm gonna hand that out and share that with you guys that are here before you leave. But if there's any questions or input that you might want to add here to what I've shared with you, I'm open to that right now.
I just have some concerns about this. What do you think the seventh generation is coming up? What are we going to tell the younger ones that are starting to get scared about this 2012 stuff? Because a lot of these young people are dumb about that. They think it's going to be the end of the world and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
We do. Is that where the elders will comfort them and tell them stories of how we're going to pursue into the future? Because I've been telling my sons the same thing. Like, don't worry about that. It's not our concern. That's not going to happen. We're going to be okay. But I mean, as we get closer to that date, what do you think? How are we going to take care of the children and comfort them?
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I had a discussion about that the other day, and I have Hunka grandparents that are deceased now, But Asa and Edna Lone Hill, two dogs, were my Huka grandparents. And Grandma Edna would talk about a lot of different things. But one of the assurances that she always gave us was that, people, sometimes a young person would come and say, well, I've been sober for a while and I'm just getting tired of it. I think I'm just going to fall off the wagon and start drinking. Or sometimes I feel like committing suicide. Or, the problems that young people have. And her response was always the same, in that, well, we're born under this pipe. In this pipe, and the belief that goes with it, there is no ending and no beginning. It's a continuous circle of life. And so we as and I'm sure that you're a part of this, we believe in the same thing. And throughout the world, there's a lot of different cultures, and there's a lot of different. They have their ideologies, they have their beliefs, they have their prophecies, and we respect them, and we leave those to them. And if they ask us to support them, we will. But we also have to have that belief in what that goes along with this pipe. That in this pipe there is no end. You just gotta, and it's the same thing as there's no such thing as giving up. We just get up and we go again, and so we with the concern, with our belief in the pipe, and with our concerns for them, and with the help of the spirits, we'll always find words to comfort them, and we've got to get them past. Those are I guess media blitzes. That's the national conversation, and that's okay. But we've got to also encourage them to stand on their own beliefs also.
Yeah, I mean that puts it all together. But the kids say it's media and internet that just going crazy. I think that the world's coming. Sometimes I just tell them that the Dakota people, we already had the end of the world as we knew it already did. So are you worrying about this? We made it through once. I think we'll be okay again.
Yeah.
Explain it that way. We'll be okay. We've learned a lot from that too.
Yeah, and those are comforting words. Just hang on to them, and you'll see when the need comes, that you'll see the how would you say, the success of helping them in those words.
We just have faith in the ancestors because we made it this far. They have a lot of wisdom, knowledge, and this is how we made it this far. It's almost having that faith. Life just wasn't grandma's. And that's why I do the things I do today, because there were such tremendous people. I can't say enough. They believed in it. Another thing that some of the elders told me, that your lifetime and whatever you do on a daily basis for your life, you're supposed to be setting up for the future 7 generations ahead of you. Everything you do in this lifetime is you're setting things up for 7 generations ahead of you in this lifetime. That's kind of your goal, your charge, is to set things up for the future. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and actually that's exactly what this is that how would you say, like a support network for the next 7 generations.
Continuum.
Yeah, and I guess the bundles that I was discussing or talked about were exactly for that same goal there, because I would like to know clear back to the beginning of time who my ancestors were, because that creates a greater foundation for your current life. And so if we have that to pass on with our children in each family, that in its own way is helping the next 7 generations.
Thank you.
thanks for your question. And
Maybe this is totally off the subject, but it was brought up earlier by one of the speakers, and that was the predominance of, even on my reserve, of young men, particularly young women, who, seem to be doing everything in their power to disassociate themselves with our tribe. Although they still live there, they're they shave their heads and they disfigure themselves. They're highly violent. They're super thieves. I'm just curious. Are you, or in Market? I know in my case, we're always addressing even those children, to bring them back in. What is your feelings on
well, in regards to that, I'll just use a tribal council for an example. The tribal council doesn't have a 1-year plan or a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, and they don't take the children in to say, here, I want you guys to not drink, I don't want you guys to do drugs, I don't want you to steal, I want you guys to stay sober, and I want you to get educated, because we've got this plan going on here, and we're going to need a lawyer, we're going to need a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. They put them on hold. They put them over here and they're waiting. We're not sharing anything with them. And so young people get bored very easily. And one person found some mischief and had a fun time with it. So another one joined him. And then pretty soon, a good majority of them are involved in this mischief here. In the meantime, our leadership is over here trying to sort things out and keep things going. So they're not paying attention here, but they're not including them in what the future is going to be. So they kind of got out of hand. But you can use that example in any culture. As soon as we reach a level and we start to share with them, like I seen happen last year, I seen it happening even today here. A friend of mine is a grandma. She's raising her grandchildren. She tells them, she's got them on the powwow trail. She tells them she don't want them to drink or to be fooling around. But she not only tells them to not do that, she gives them things to do while they're not doing that. And one of the things that she did was she took her granddaughter out of school after consulting with the administrator there, that they received funds to teach the Lakota language there. So as part of that, can I get my granddaughter excused and take her with me to participate in this? So little by little, we'll start to get their attention back and start to when we start to include them in our future, our activities that are geared towards the future, we give them things to do. And some of them we're not going to be able to save. Just like in our generation, I'm sure you got high school friends that didn't make it past high school, whether they left in the war or whether they left in a tragic accident because of alcohol. The thing that we have to remember is that we have to include those young people and include them by giving them things to do and making them aware that they have responsibilities and destinations that are better done with sober minds and intelligent and educated minds, whether it be educated in the modern way or educated culturally, but encouraging them and showing them that we've got something to do here and we really need you young people to help out. So including them and then taking them along. And I think as the years go by, again, patience is difficult when you see all of that disruption and problems going on. But we got to be patient. And once we get on an even keel and we've got them working with us, those things are going to become a part of the past. And that's my belief and perspective. Any other inputs or discussions? Well, I want to give you guys each of this what I copied on, and it isn't. It's just parts of what I talked about here, but it's to kind of help you remember and to remind you, and just a little part of the vision here. But I want to encourage you to find out where iron lighting is, and I want to encourage you to find a young person in your family, and if you're not a parent yet, I want you to just come there anyway and participate, because there's a lot of logistical stuff that has to happen with any event, and the more the merrier, I always say. And it's remote, and it's a good place to come and be a part of history in the making. So I'm gonna pass these out to you guys. But first of all, thank you guys for coming in here and sharing your time by sitting and listening, and those of you that inputted, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.